Bernie Madoff, Alan Stanford, Scott Rothstein, Nevin Shapiro, and now famous Sam Bankman-Fried were all successful businessmen and professionals, but they all had one thing in common. They were running massive Ponzi schemes that defrauded investors out of billions of dollars. Today, we deep dive into how billions were stolen, how it was covered up. Make sure to stay until the end to hear about the newest scandal, the FTX crypto exchange collapse. Here we go. So what is a Ponzi scheme? Let me try to explain it really quick and go back to our infamous characters. A Ponzi scheme is a type of fraud that is named after Charles Ponzi, who became notorious for using this method in the early 20th century. The basic idea behind the Ponzi scheme is that an individual or organization promises to invest investors' money in a legitimate opportunity like stocks, bonds, or real estate. However, instead of actually investing the money, the individual or organization uses new investor money to pay returns on earlier investors. This creates the illusion of high returns and attracts more and more investors into the scheme. The scheme can also continue as long as there are enough new investors to pay returns to earlier ones, and eventually it collapses when the operator can no longer attract new investors or is unable to pay returns to their earlier investors. Ponzi schemes are typically run by one person or a small group of people, and they often target specific communities or groups. It's important to remember that Ponzi schemes are not legitimate investment opportunities and are illegal. They are often characterized by unrealistic promises of high returns with little or no risk, pressure to invest quickly, secrecy, and the inability to withdraw money from the investment. First, let's start with Bernie Madoff. Madoff was a Wall Street investment advisor and financier who was considered a respected professional in the industry. He had a long history of success in the financial world and even served as the chairman of the NASDAQ exchange in New York. Madoff was well known for his exclusive and elite clientele, including celebrities and high net worth individuals. Despite his apparent success, Madoff was secretly running a massive Ponzi scheme, one of the largest and most destructive in history. The scheme was simple but effective. Madoff convinced investors to entrust him with their money by promising consistent, high returns with no risk. He created fake account statements and performance records to show that their investments were performing well, while in reality, he was not investing the money at all. Instead, he used new investors' money to pay earlier investors, creating the illusion of a profitable investment. The scheme went on for decades, and Madoff was able to attract billions of dollars from investors around the world. However, in 2008, Madoff's reputation was forever tarnished when his own son blew the whistle on his father's scheme. The truth about Madoff's fraudulent activities was revealed, and the extent of the damage became clear. The scheme was worth a whopping $65 billion and resulted in thousands of people losing their life savings. Many people, including charities and retirement funds, were left in ruin. Madoff pleaded guilty to 11 felony frauds and was sentenced to 150 years in prison. He passed away in 2021 while serving his sentence. The Madoff scandal shook the financial world to its core and highlighted the need for greater oversight and regulation of the industry. The Madoff scandal also had a ripple effect on the wider financial industry. The SEC was heavily criticized for failing to detect Madoff's scheme, and despite several red flags and whistleblowers, they were not able to catch him. The SEC implemented several new regulations and reforms to improve its ability to detect and prevent financial fraud in the future. Additionally, many investors and financial institutions were left scrambling to recover their lost funds. The court-appointed trustee in charge of liquidating Madoff's assets filed lawsuits against several banks and other financial institutions, alleging that they had aided and abetted Madoff's scheme. The lawsuits were settled for billions of dollars, which helped to reimburse some of the victims of the Ponzi scheme. Next, we have Alan Stanford. Like Madoff, Stanford was a successful businessman and financier who built a business empire with over 30,000 clients and $8 billion in assets under his management. He was the chairman of Stanford Financial Group, a conglomerate of companies that included a bank, a brokerage firm, and an asset management company. In 2008, the SEC began investigating Stanford's companies, suspecting that they were involved in a Ponzi scheme. It was revealed that Stanford had promised investors high returns on certificates of deposit issued by his offshore bank, but instead of investing the money, he used it to fund his lavish lifestyle and prop up his failing businesses. He also used money from new investors to pay off old investors, creating the illusion of high returns. Stanford was charged with fraud and was sentenced to 110 years in prison and ordered to forfeit $5.9 billion. Scott Rothstein. Like Madoff and Stanford before him, he was also a successful professional in his field, in this case, a lawyer and a philanthropist in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. However, in 2009, it was revealed that his empire was built on a Ponzi scheme that defrauded investors of over $1.2 billion. Rothstein convinced investors, including members of the legal community, to invest in his law firm by promising high returns on investment in legal settlements that didn't actually exist. He created fake legal settlements and produced fake documents to support his claims and used new investors' money to pay off old, a classic Ponzi scheme. Rothstein was arrested, charged with multiple counts of fraud and racketeering, and was later convicted and sentenced to 50 years in prison. Nevin Shapiro, the founder of Capital Investments USA, was a successful businessman and a huge player in the Miami community. He promised high returns on investment in his wholesale grocery business, but instead he used the money to support his luxurious lifestyle and, of course, to gain influence among University of Miami football players and coaches by providing them cash, gifts, and prostitutes. He created fake documents and financial statements to make it look like his business was profitable and used new investors to pay off old ones. Again, classic Ponzi scheme. He was charged with securities fraud, money laundering, and obstruction of justice, and sentenced to only 20 years in prison. Before I move on, please help us out and subscribe. Go ahead, hit that button now. Now let's get to the main story for today's video. FTX and Sam Bankman-Fried. I'm sure you've heard about the crypto exchange giant collapsing in a matter of days, but what really happened? And do we know enough to call it a Ponzi scheme? $152 billion. That's how much the largest cryptocurrencies lost in 72 hours. Let's deep dive into how this happened. Sam Bankman-Fried, or SBF as he's known on social media, founded Alameda Research in 2017. Alameda Research was founded as a quantitative trading firm, basically a company that invests and trades in different derivatives, including cryptocurrencies. Then in 2019, SBF founded FTX, a cryptocurrency exchange platform. Their main product included a crypto token called FTT. FTX exploded onto the scene with heavy hitter investors from Wall Street to Silicon Valley and an array of celebrity endorsers, including Tom Brady and Steph Curry. On November 2, 2022, an article was published on CoinDesk based on a leaked Alameda Research balance sheet that claimed Alameda had over $14 billion in assets, but most of their assets were being held in FTT tokens. Here's where we start remembering Ponzi. If SBF owned a majority in Alameda and a majority in FTX, then basically he was taking money from one company and buying the other company's products. This would create the illusion of high returns. On November 6th, Binance, another crypto exchange that had a large investment in FTT, tweeted that they would offload their entire holding in FTX, which created an avalanche of people selling off FTT. 48 hours later, on November 8th, the FTX token lost nearly 80% of its value. On November 11th, only 72 hours after FTT lost 80% of its value, a Wall Street Journal article was published claiming that FTX tapped into customer accounts to fund Alameda's risky bets. Basically, SBF was taking money that was left in digital wallets in the FTX and sending it to Alameda to invest without the knowledge or consent of the owners of those wallets. On that day, Alameda and FTX filed for bankruptcy, and SBF resigned as CEO. He was taking money from unknowing people on FTX and funneling it into Alameda. Alameda was taking that money and betting big and very risky on cryptos, sometimes even betting against their own clients in an effort to show higher returns and bring in more investors. Sounds a lot like the other 4 guys we mentioned in this video. In conclusion, these 5 stories of Madoff, Stanford, Rothstein, Shapiro, and SBF serve as a cautionary tale of the dangers of Ponzi schemes and the importance of doing your due diligence before you invest your money. Always be skeptical of promises of high returns with no risk, and be sure to check the background and track record of any investment opportunity. Remember, if something is too good to be true, it probably is. I'll see you guys next week.